And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Okay, start off here looking at tonight's weather. Low pressure coming up to the Alaska Peninsula with snow here to the west and north of the center, mixed precipitation in between this area and the rain to the southeast, especially over Kodiak Island tonight. A weak low in the central Aleutians, another front farther to the west we'll see tomorrow, pulls eastward there, but not too strong, actually kind of on the weak side out there. High pressure, light winds here, central Bering Sea, Adak, Yatka, central Aleutians. And this low slides up to the north here, pushing snow all the way up to the northwest coast. And the front right across the southern Cook Inlet, Kenai Peninsula areas, so cloudy skies, areas of precipitation associated with that. Should be dry over the Copper River Basin, as well as the southeast coast. And for the day on Monday, low pressure south of Kodiak Island, breezy conditions, rain all the way up to the Kenai Peninsula and into Prince William Sound again, dry in the interior, dry and maybe partly to mostly sunny for the Panhandle, and an area of snow all along the west coast areas, and a stronger front now out west with a stronger low pressure area, bringing more wind and rain into Adak and Atka. And for tonight, look for west and northwest winds on the south coast at 10 to 15 knots, and the north coast, southeast winds 10 knots, east 20 knots on the extreme north coast. Lynn Canal, north at 10, Stevens Passage, southeast at 10, and Clarence Strait, northwest at 10 knots. For tomorrow on the south coast, or for Monday on the south coast, east winds at 20 knots. North coast, east winds 15 to 25 knots. Lynn Canal, Glacier Bay, and Clarence Strait, all looking at north winds at about 10 knots. And for Prince William Sound, we've got east winds in the forecast for Sunday at 20, east-southeast 20 knots for the North Gulf Coast, small craft advisories, Barren Islands, Kamishak Bay for 25-knot winds there. Cook Inlet, east-northeasterlies at 15 to 20 knots. Cook Inlet on Monday, northeast winds 20 to 30 knots, east winds 30 knots, Kamishak Bay. Gale warnings here for the Barren Islands, east at 35 knots, and the North Gulf Coast, pretty brisk winds there, east at 30 knots, and east at 20 for Prince William Sound. Kodiak Island, Sunday, south to southeast winds 20 to 25 knots. And we've got variable winds here, 15 to 20 knots for the Alaska Peninsula, southeast 25 for Bristol Bay. And then for Monday, the peninsula here, north winds 15 to 20 knots, north at 15 for Bristol Bay, and east winds 25 to 30 knots for the Kodiak Island zones. And for the eastern Aleutians tomorrow, north winds 20 to 25 knots, east to northeast winds 15 knots for the central Aleutians, and coming up to gale force winds, mostly from Kiska to Shimei with that next strong front out there pushing in up to, 35 to 40 knots. And then those gales expand eastward here all the way to Atka Island, south to southeasterlies, 35 to 45 knots there. And for the eastern Aleutians, east-northeast winds 25 to 30 knots. For the southwest coast, north winds 25 knots, northwest 25 there for St. Lawrence Island, northwest at 20 knots for Norton Sound, north winds 30 knots, St. Matthew Island and the Pribilofs. Moving ahead to Monday, east winds 30 knots for St. Matthew Island, northwest at 25 here for the Pribilof Islands, and north winds 20 to 25 knots for St. Lawrence Island and the southwest coast with a northwest breeze at 15 knots in Norton Sound. And for the Chukchi Sea tomorrow, we've got west winds 10 to 15 knots, western Arctic coast, east winds 15 to 25 knots, and 20-knot east winds for the central and eastern Beaufort Sea coast. And for the day Monday, east side here, east winds 20 knots, brisk wind advisories, central and western Arctic coast, for winds still out of the east at 25 knots, but for the Chukchi Sea, west winds at 15 knots.